Have you ever looked at something like the pyramids and just wondered, how? How did they do that? Or, how can one person lift a car with a jack? Well, it's not magic, and it's definitely not superhuman strength. It's physics, and it's all thanks to some of the most brilliant and timeless tools ever invented, simple machines. So today, we're going to break down exactly how these amazing devices let us do things that seem, well, impossible.
All right, let's just dive right in with a problem that is, literally as old as humanity. You've got this massive, heavy thing that you need to move, but you're just not strong enough. So what do?
Well, the answer comes from a handful of brilliant, ancient tools that basically multiply our own force. And these simple machines, they are the building blocks of pretty much every complex mechanical device we use today. But first, we need to clear something up. There's this huge misconception about what these machines actually do. It's a really common mistake to think they somehow let you get away with doing less work overall. Okay, so at its very core, a simple machine is a force multiplier. That's the key. It takes the force you can apply, we call that the effort, and it magnifies it so you can overcome a much, much bigger force, which we call the load. Really, it's all about leverage. And this right here is the fundamental trade-off. There is no free lunch in physics, right? The machine makes the job feel easier because you're applying less force. But you pay for that, and you pay for it with distance. You have to apply that smaller force over a much longer distance. Just think about walking up a gentle ramp versus climbing a steep ladder to get to the same height. The ramp is way longer, for sure, but it takes a whole lot less effort.
So if it's all just a trade-off, how do we measure this force multiplication thing? Well, it turns out there are a few key rules that tell us exactly how much of an advantage these machines are giving us. So the first, and honestly the most important idea, is mechanical advantage, or MA. It's just a number, but it answers the big question: how much stronger is this machine making me, right? So if the mechanical advantage is 10, that means you can lift 100 pounds with just 10 pounds of your own effort. Pretty cool. And the formula for it is just beautifully simple. The physics behind it can look complicated, but it all just boils down to this. You take the load, so the weight of the thing you're trying to lift, and you divide it by the effort, the force you're putting in. That simple ratio, that's your mechanical advantage. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. This is the velocity ratio. This number is what measures that trade-off we were just talking about. That extra distance you have to cover to make things easier on yourself. And again, the formula is super straightforward. You just divide the distance your effort moves, like how far you pull a rope, by the distance the load actually moves up. So if you pull that rope for 10 feet just to lift a box one single foot off the ground, your velocity ratio is 10. It's a perfect measure of that distance trade-off. Okay, so let's bring these two ideas together now. See, in a perfect imaginary world with no friction, the mechanical advantage and the velocity ratio would be exactly the same. But we don't live there. Here on Earth, we have to deal with friction. And that's where efficiency comes in. Efficiency basically measures how much of the work you put into a machine actually gets turned into useful work lifting that load. An ideal machine, that perfect one, would be 100% efficient. But in the real world, some of your effort is always going to be wasted just fighting against friction. And this is where it all clicks into place. The relationship here is just so elegant. A machine's efficiency is simply its mechanical advantage divided by its velocity ratio. This one little formula connects everything: the force you gain, the distance you trade, all while perfectly accounting for the energy you lose to real-world friction. So let's see this in action, because this is where it gets really interesting. In this example, the machine multiplies your effort by 40 times. That's the MA. But the velocity ratio is 80. So you divide 40 by 80, and you get 0.5, or 50% efficiency. What that means is that exactly half of all the effort you put into this machine is just being lost to friction. So this whole idea of efficiency, it leads to a really fascinating question. What happens if you just let go? Does the heavy load stay put, or does it come crashing down, making the machine spin backwards? This is the whole concept of reversibility. And it turns out there's a magic number. A machine is only reversible, meaning the heavy load can make it go backwards if its efficiency is greater than 50%. Think about it. If it's less than 50%, that means more than half the energy is being lost to friction. There's just not enough energy left in the system for the load to overcome that friction by itself. So let's look at this one. Here, the calculated efficiency is only 40%. Since that's less than 50%, the friction inside the machine is actually strong enough to hold that load in place all by itself, even after you take your hands off. That's what we call a self-locking machine.
All right, so now that we've got the rules down, let's see how they work in a more complex, kind of real-world situation. Because sometimes just knowing the formula isn't enough. You have to understand the context.
So a while back, a high school engineering teacher actually posted this question online. They were really confused because they kept seeing two different formulas for the mechanical advantage of a simple wedge, depending on which textbook or website they looked at.
And you can see them here. One formula uses the length of the slope of the wedge. The other one uses its depth, so the length from the flat base to the sharp point. At first glance, they look totally contradictory. So which one is right?
Well, the top answer on the forum was brilliant. It's not that one formula is right and the other is wrong. The surprising thing is, they apply to completely different situations. It all comes down to context. That first formula, that's for a situation like pushing a heavy object up a ramp. But the second one is for a situation like splitting a log with an axe, right? Where you're driving the wedge in and the forces are pushing out to the sides. They are both 100% correct, just for different jobs. And really, that's the big takeaway here. These principles, they're not just abstract ideas in some dusty textbook. They are literally everywhere. Your bottle opener, it's a lever. A road that winds up a mountain, that's a giant inclined plane. The zipper on your jacket is just a series of tiny little wedges. And every single screw is just an inclined plane wrapped around a cylinder. Once you start looking for them, you're going to see them everywhere. These simple, elegant principles are just silently working all around us, multiplying our effort and making our entire modern world possible. So what are you going to spot first?